Well, yesterday I left off by talking about how Paul was really missing Timothy, that they had never been separated really like this until now. And it was a separation when Paul left Timothy at Ephesus and began to continue on his journeys, that it was really something that they probably understood was going to be long term and might never have the chance to come together again. And that's always the frightening thing, that there are many of you, I'm sure, who have had those times when you're saying goodbye to somebody who's going away to serve around the world in the military or something else. And there's always that possibility that this may be the last time that you'll connect. And you pray, of course, that it won't. I know so many times some of you can understand that you sent your husband or your wife off to work one day and then they never came home. And that loss is really overwhelming. You know, it creates not only tears, but almost a heart gut level pain that's even impossible to express. You know, it's like a groaning on the inside, a travailing on the inside, because what you're feeling is the separation, and what separation produces is a thing called loneliness. And it's very clear that Paul is very, very lonely, because at the end of this letter, in chapter 4, verse 9, he says to Timothy, do your best to come to me quickly. And then he goes on to add, for Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia, and only Luke is with me. Now, I don't think he was depreciating the value of Luke's friendship. He was his constant companion. Luke's loyalty to Paul is really pretty astounding when you think of it, because he left a fairly comfortable life to go on the road to be the personal physician and kind of constant companion of the Apostle Paul. And of course, we have the book of Acts because of that companionship. But I think the thing that stands out more is the fact that this relationship he had with Timothy was one that was like a father's son. Many of us don't realize that, but I think it's very likely that Paul had been married and had a family before he became a believer. And the reason I say that was because he was in the position of a rabbi, and a very highly placed rabbi within the Jewish political or religious economy. And I mean, he had direct access to the Sanhedrin, which tells us that he was in a very influential part of the Jewish religious community. And he had to be married. You couldn't be in that position in those days unless you were married. And of course, you got married, the first thing is you produce kids. So that when Paul says to the Philippians that because of Christ, he has lost everything, I think implied that is he lost not just his position, his status, his wealth, and all the rest of that, but he had lost his family. And Timothy had become that replacement, that as the prophet said, the mother who is barren has more children than she who is fruitful. I think it's Isaiah who says that. And it's really, significant, because Timothy had become such a close companion and protege, but someone Paul loved deeply. And that realization that they're not going to be there, and here he is in prison. He's saying to Timothy, who is across the sea, really basically two seas. You got the Aegean and the Ionian Sea. You have to go through from Africa or Asia Minor, basically across the Aegean Sea to Greece, and then from across Greece, probably through Corinth, and then up to Rome, where Paul was. I mean, it was a long, long journey, a hard journey, and he says to him, do your best to come to me quickly. And Paul realizes that if you can't get here soon, I won't be on this earth. He probably didn't have a date yet for his execution, but he knew it was just a matter of time. And so he's very lonely, very heartbroken, because not only was Timothy not there, but people like Demas and Crescens and Titus had been so frightened and so terrified by what was going on that they literally disappeared. They ran away. They went to places that were basically, they went home to where they hoped they would be safe and protected from the same consequence that Paul was under. And it wasn't an unfounded fear, because Nero was arresting a lot of Christians. We know that a lot of Christians were executed as a way of deferring responsibility for the fire of Rome to this small group of odd fellows called the Christians. But, again, he's speaking out of that issue of loneliness. And I think it's important for us to think about that for a moment, because loneliness is something that every one of us experiences. And we even know the dynamic of being lonely in a crowd, that when I look out over the congregation on a sunny morning and I see a number of people sitting there, and yet I realize there are people in the midst of that who really feel alone. They've never had a connection of community. They don't have anybody who is going to notice whether they're there or they're not there. And that may seem like we don't want to intrude and get into other people's business, but at the same time, it's just really wonderful to be missed. You're just wonderful to be missed, because if you're missed, it means you matter. And so there are people all around us, including maybe some of us. And so one of the things, if you're struggling with that loneliness, I would ask you to pray that simple prayer. Remember, there's no small prayer. There's every prayer is heard by God and becomes big by the power of a big God. But pray that God would bring into your life someone who could begin to share with you and become that friend, that companion, somebody that would be basically syncopado with you. I mean, just link up. And I say that because not everybody has an affinity with everybody. In other words, that we think that we're supposed to feel really close and tight with everybody, but there are certain people who have no idea what your life experiences are like. I mean, quite honestly, if I look at my own self, I realize that if you're not a pastor and you haven't been in that role, you really don't understand what that's like. And the pluses and the negatives. There's some wonderful benefits, and I don't regret the calling, and I don't regret what I'm doing. I love the opportunity, and I feel greatly honored. But there are certain things you go through when you're in that position that other people don't go through. And so you realize that there's a certain limit to the conversation and explanations you can offer, because you can even explain what you're going through. And the people you're talking to, because they haven't shared that experience, don't get it. So if you've lost somebody who's really close to you, somebody you really love dearly, and you're trying to share that with people, it doesn't take long to realize that most people are uncomfortable with the conversation, or basically they're kind of obtuse to what you're talking about because they have no emotional connection to it. I know for myself that there was this juncture where we had a late miscarriage, and we lost a baby that we were really excited about having and hadn't planned for, and we were pretty excited this baby was coming. And my wife had a late miscarriage, and it was pretty devastating for both of us. You go through that, even for the whole family, the kids as well. And it was interesting because I remember a few years later having to do a funeral for a young couple that had lost a baby. And suddenly I found a whole emotional connection that hadn't been there before. I mean, quite honestly, I had never felt what they were feeling. And even today, as I've had a chance to lose a lot of family members, parents and others through the years, now funerals are very emotional experiences for me, because somehow I find myself feeling what these people are feeling. I understand the sense of pain and the groaning inside, the loss and the separation. And so I think it's really a valuable thing to go through those kind of experiences in life. And I think they make you a deeper and more empathetic person, but at the same time realizing that you're only able really to communicate that with people who have gone through the same journey with you. They've had that same life experience. I think we have a ministry in our church called Grief Share, which is really profoundly effective, because basically it's a fellowship for people who have lost loved ones, and it's led by people and participated by people who know exactly what your story is and know exactly what kind of emotions you're going through. And that in itself, being able to tell your story, being able to share it with people who can empathetically identify and respond to it, not necessarily having any answers, because you lose somebody you love. I don't know what answers are there other than the fact that one day we'll see them again. But tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and that bed is empty, that set of shoes isn't going to leave the closet. And those kind of things begin to strike very real in people's lives. And it's that point that if somebody just says, but I know what you're feeling, I understand what you're going through, that can be a tremendous sense of not being alone, that I'm not the only one going through this. And there are others who have gone through it. And there's others who not only have survived, but somehow profoundly and miraculously by the grace of God, they are thriving in their lives because they have endured hardship as good soldiers of Jesus Christ. And the loss of loved one is one of the parts of enduring hardships as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. I wish it didn't have to be, but it is, and we need to embrace it and learn from it. Well, God bless. We'll pick this up tomorrow. I think tomorrow I'll try to get to verse 5. That's kind of an ambitious thrust, but I'll try. God bless you and go in His grace.